Everyone, it's Kim. I wanted to take a minute to show you how I made this faux leather look out of a brown paper bag. I'm hoping you could see that really well. Let's see, I know we got a glare on the camera, but I'm trying to show you the texture that has. Maybe that's too bright, huh? There you go. It started out with very simple things. I had literally a brown paper grocery bag that I took to the sink and I just ran it under the water. So you could see I kind of got it evenly wet. Not soaking wet, but I wet the back and the front. And I simply took the bag and I scrunched it up. And I squeezed it around for just for a few times. Maybe for about a minute. I just sat there squeezing it. I'm kind of like relaxing the fibers, adding those wonderful little, folds in there, letting it go like that. Okay? Once you do that, you have your wonderful little folds in your paper. Okay, now you don't want to, put them all out, but the next thing I did, and I did a couple of different things, and it's up to you what you want to do. I have my distress inks, wherever I sent them here. I have a couple different colors. I got this little pack at, I don't know where I got it, on sale somewhere. And this one is antique linen. There's antique linen, vintage photo, walnut, and then a black. And I did use the black. I'm not so sure I would do that again on that first one. All I did was I took the antique linen and I just rubbed across the surface. Just like this. You won't see a lot of color at first. I'm not here to add color. I'm just adding a little bit of depth to it. Because later I'm going to add more color to it on the high parts. Okay? Then I took my vintage photo and I did basically the same thing. I'm not pushing. I'm just grazing the surface in all directions. And it's just adding a little bit of that color to it. Because I'm going to be doing this more after it starts getting a little bit drier too, to add it to the tops of those peaks. See how it's changed the color just a little bit, adding just a little bit more depth? And then the walnut. Once again, I'm just touching the surface. I'm not rubbing hard. I'm just skimming. And I do want some spots down low. So once I rub it thoroughly, okay, then I can come back if I want to add some depth. And I use the corner of it, and I add a little bit down in the depth of it. Just a few spots. I don't want a lot, because I can always add color later. It's hard to take it away. See, the dark is the one I added kind of the most to it, because I'm going to do something that most people probably don't do. I'm going to take this back to my sink. I'm going to run water over it again, and I'm going to scrunch it up again, so that I want those colors to kind of go down into the crevices a little bit. With the distress oxides, when you get them wet, they kind of go into the fibers more. So that's how I got my lower colors to this. So I'm going to do that at the sink, and then I'll be right back. Okay, now I wanted to show you. I did get it wet enough that, as you can see, how the color's coming out now. This is an old towel that I keep just for crafting. Okay, so I'm kind of getting those colors, I think, at least, to go into those fibers a little bit. And then I just opened it back up very carefully. It's not horribly fragile, okay? So there, now I have some color. It should be down more into the base of this from where I started. You're going to have your lights and your darks, okay? Then what I did was I used a base card. Now I'm going to tell you, when I got done, it peeled off of this really easy. I didn't want the thickness, so I just took one corner. I started at one corner and it peeled off in two pieces, and it was off really quick. So if you want it to stick better, you're going to have to use some type of a stronger glue, because it did come off relatively easy, which is exactly what I wanted it to do. I did not try doing it directly on the parchment paper. That's up to you if you want to try it that way. Then I took plain old Elmer's school glue. I took 2 parts glue to 1 part water, and I mixed it up. I just put it on my paper. This is probably why it didn't stick real well, because I'm not using a ton. I just I wanted something, it keeps it from curling up too bad on me. Then I took the papers and I ripped them up into pieces, fairly large pieces, and this is how I got more scrunches. When I laid them back down, I could add some more creases to them. If there were too many, I could take them away. It depends on how many creases you want in your paper. Took my glue and I just put a pretty generous coat over the top. See, that crease is a little bit too much. I can move it out just a little bit, pat it down. If I want a little bit more, I can push it back with my fingers, with my paintbrush. And the thing is I like to be able to feel it with my fingers. If I feel like I don't have enough, I can add some more. Then I just took another piece, laid it down, overlapping, because I want those edges where they overlap. Took my glue, forgot to go underneath, got to put a little bit underneath. I'm gluing it down really well. Trying to make sure I want those little seams to show. The best thing is if you don't have enough wrinkles, you can always add more paper on top later. And make sure to put a little bit where I'm going to overlap it. Making my wrinkles where I want them. You don't want them too sticking up, and you can mash them down. See, I can still get some really nice wrinkles out of it, but they don't have to be sticking up. I want them to stick together. Through this. To me, this is the most fun because I get to play in the glue a little bit. This wrinkle's a little bit too big here. Mash that one down just a little bit. To me, the more texture, the better, but you don't want the wrinkles sticking up too far because leather has a texture, not necessarily big pieces sticking up all over. And you can make the pieces as big or as small as you want. The other one, my pieces were a little bit smaller, but for this I just didn't want to take too long to do it, to show you. So I'm doing a little bit bigger pieces, and this way I have relatively large creases too, where the lines come together, which is really cool as well. I like those little pieces where they look raggedy coming together. I did use some of the color from the back. See that piece of red? I kind of threw a couple little pieces in there just to give it a different color. I'm just going to glue them because I want these to kind of stay right where I have them. You're going to let this dry. After you're done gluing everything together, you're going to let it dry till it's almost dry. I get it so it's like at least 2/3 of the way dry, and then I come back and I add some more color to it. Just over the surface, and then I let it dry a little bit more, and then I finish it off with the final touch of color that I want to add to it. Okay, I'm going to make some wrinkles in here, not too tall. Don't be afraid to put the glue down. It's not going to show, you know, because the school glue dries clear. It dries. This dries a matte finish. When I got done, I used a glossy Mod Podge that I finished it off with, and that protected it, made sure everything was well stuck together. And then I just peeled it off the surface that I had underneath because I didn't want it that thick for what I was using it for. Yep. Put the wrinkles, little few wrinkles, but not too big in there. This is where the fun is with paper, I think, is playing with it, making it, manipulating it the way you want it to look. Adding those folds and creases where you like them. I overhang the edges. I think it gives it a better, it sticks together better. Even if it sticks down to the paper behind it, that's okay. That's I use parchment paper, and it peels off once it's dry, or you can just trim it off. So that's what I did. I did that over the entire thing. So I'm going to finish this up because, you know, I don't know how much you want to sit here and watch me glue, but I made sure I had little wrinkles. If I didn't think there was enough wrinkles, I took another piece. Like say I wanted another wrinkle here, I just take some glue. I could add something here to add more texture to it, play with it a little bit. There, now I have another big wrinkle there. Added some nice texture to it. Maybe I want another little wrinkle with, let's see, let's find a piece with some color on it. Just use a little edge of the color. I could add just a little piece of this red to it in a spot that I think needs a little bit of something. Oop. Glue that down. There, now I have a little bit of contrasting color in there, which is really cool. Okay, so I'm going to finish covering this. Once I get done with this, I'm going to let it dry about halfway. When I get to that point where it's just damp, I'll come back and I'll show you how I add some more paint, more of the color to it for right now. Well, I said I was going to leave, but I received a phone call and she asked me to see the whole thing, so here you go. We will do this really quick here. Gives you an idea. Wanted to see the process better, so sticking down my bag, adding some glue, making sure there's some cool wrinkles, and if there's not enough, I can add some more. Okay, we're almost to the end here. I could put that whole thing down, but I do like to rip it just a little bit. Oops. Scrunch it up. I have not tried it with just the bag without tearing it, although I do have quite a large piece here somewhere. I'll have to see if I can find it. That I did not do that. It was a practice piece and it turned out okay as well. So you might not have to rip it, but I do think it adds that textured edge to it. One thing I wanted to try that I did not do on this one. Let's give this a try on this end here. I'm going to try to ink this end up just a tiny bit. Don't know if it'll work on something this wet. See if it'll add even another depth of texture to it. Let's try it out. I like to experiment when I do these things. Don't really see it, but you never know until you get it down. I'm always playing with what I'm doing. And I do, you know, I watch a million YouTubes. Somebody else did the brown bag. They didn't do it this way. They just scrunched it up and added color to it. Other people don't wet it. I like it better wet because I can add better wrinkles to it and get them where I want them to be. So there's 100 techniques out there. You have to find what's going to work best for you. And I like this because I feel like I can repair spots if I get them bad. If they don't do what I want them to do. Let's try something here. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try inking it. See if that adds a bit of color to it. Oh, see, that added some pretty cool color to it. Might be something else to try. Got to go fast so I don't... Let's see, I like that end with the ink on it. Let's add you. Up here. What do you here? Can always... Here, I want you up in there. Can add a little inky to it. Well, that's kind of a straight line, so I want to mash that one around a little bit. Put the wrong torn edge there, so let me mash that end up a little bit so it doesn't look so straight. Take you. Fill in the blank here. Cover that. Fill in the blank. Just filling in the blank. There you go. All right, so that's what I did. I covered the entire thing just like this. And if anything's sticking up too far and you don't think it's adhering together, come back. This wrinkle is pretty large here. I can come back with my fingers or my brush and I can pat it down to make sure it's not like a big bubble. Just want to make sure it's sticking together really well. I don't see any other spots that I'm too worried about. I want the lines, but I don't want them sticking far up off the other bits of paper. I don't mind a few lines. I want those lines. That's what adds to the texture. And do I see spots that I don't think have enough? I do have a couple spots I would like to add a little bit more. So I'm just going to go right over top. I'm going to take this little skinny piece here and go through here. I'm going to add some more right here. All right, now if I was making a bunch of these, I would just set this aside and let it dry most of the way, which is what I'm going to do. And I mean, I turned you off for like maybe 2 minutes. So otherwise, this is how long it took. It didn't take hardly any time just to get to this point. The hardest part is waiting for it to dry. And to be honest, what I do is I have a gas oven with a pilot light, and I just toss it in my oven and let it kind of dry for a bit. I'm just making sure some of my edges aren't too straight. This one I had a pretty straight edge, so I'm going to just move it so it's more of a wiggle instead of a straight edge. I just make sure my straight edges are a little crooked if I see anything that looks too straight in there. And that's it. All right, so that's it for now. Once it's mostly dry, I come back with the ink again, just like I did earlier. This end's a little bit drier, and I'll just touch different areas once again. I don't want to get glue all over it, so I'm going to put this aside just until the glue's not wet on the surface. That's what I mean by letting it dry. I don't want that wet glue that you can see on the surface there to get all over my ink pad. So once it dries a bit, I'll be right back. I wanted to show you. Now, as you can see, this is getting more dry. There's no glue, and you can see some dry spots. I had it, it's been about a half an hour. They're still quite wet here in the center, but, you know, the edges are quite dry. So the next step, what I did was I took my distress inks, and this is the antique linen, and this one I did a little bit of pressure, but not a lot. I'm just kind of going over the surface of it because I'm just adding some color. And this is lighter than the page, so it's probably not doing a whole heck of a lot. So if you don't have it, don't worry about it. Okay? Then I took the vintage photo. Once again, I'm just going to go over the surface. And now you can see that I'm starting to get a little bit of the color come out on the folds. Okay, I'm just kind of touching the surface. And then I do want some down in some places, so I just kind of take the corner and I gently rub down to the base of, just kind of scattered throughout. I want it to have different levels, I guess, of color on it. Okay, those are the colors I use the most. The next color, the walnut, I had to be a little bit more careful with because it is pretty dark. And I just barely touched the tops of the wrinkles. And I'm just barely skimming the surface of this. Okay, and I do go in just in a few spots because I want it to, you know, have some darker color towards the bottom. I'm using the corner. I'm just touching in a few areas to add that depth of color. I don't, kind of leaving it a little bit strong in a couple spots, but if it gets too dark, you can always take some water and wet it down. I don't have a rag here, I'd show you a minute, but before you seal it, you can fix whatever you don't like about it. If I got like a line here, I could take some wet it down a little bit and just blend it down a little bit. So don't feel that you can't fix whatever it is that you made a mistake with. Okay, and then after I did that, I went over the whole thing again with the lightest color because I wanted to make sure that it didn't have too much darkness at the top of these. And if it's peeling up at all, just push it back down because this is still a little bit wet here and it's a little bit sticky, so sometimes it grabs a couple spots and pulls it up. Okay, there. Once you add the clear Mod Podge on it, you'll be amazed at the difference in color. It turns it into this rich color that just becomes amazing. Now I let it dry completely. This is still damp. I could still, you know, flex it too easy. Now I have to let it dry for a couple of hours, and then I'll come back and Mod Podge the whole thing, and then I let it dry again, and then I'm done. So once I come back, I see I have a little spot here that I missed. I must have pulled it up, so I'm just going to take it with my ink, and I'm going to ink down in that corner. This is the walnut. Just going to add a little bit to that spot there. And make it look like there was a spot on the leather. So you could fix just about anything. Okay, this is dry now. As you can see, it's perfectly dry. I'm going to peel it off the back here. I found that it helps, sorry, it's pretty loud. It helps me keep it from curling so bad. I don't know, maybe it's just in my head, but it seems to be a little damp on the back, but I can go ahead and do the next step now. I don't want to, try not to make too much noise. I think it's like pulling a Band-Aid off. Just hurry up and get it over with. All right. Now it's stuck pretty good there. All right. So, if you want, you can add another layer of ink to it, which I'm going to do a little bit here. Get more down towards the bottom. This is the antique linen again, the lightest color. I'm just going to add a little bit. Now I'm rubbing it down onto the paper because, you know, I didn't add a lot of color down there. Just to add a little bit of highlights here and there. I don't want to do too much of the darker colors because I don't want to muddy it up too much. So I'm just going to add a little bit here and there. This is the, which one was that? That's the Vintage Photo. And then I found kind of a cool trick, if I could figure out where I put it. Where did I put my, here it is. I have this gold Sharpie marker. I don't know where I got it from. I've had it forever. And I found that if I take that and put a little bit of alcohol, let's see, on the tip of my, on a Q-tip, I could take this marker and I can add some really cool, you know, it's kind of like making an alcohol ink in a way. I could add a few gold highlights here and there. And you don't really see them at first, but they really add a little bit of sparkle. I'm just adding a few throughout. And it adds just a little bit, which you, unfortunately, I don't think you see too well on camera. I don't think you could see that very much. I mean, it's just really not adding a lot. But if you hold it in the right light, it just adds a little kind of sparkle to it. And I hit the, after I get done, I hit it a little bit. You could take it, if you want to add more. It depends on how much gold you want, and kind of hit over the surface lightly and hit some of these high spots. And I don't want to add too much because, again, I don't want it to be obvious. It's a very subtle, well, you probably can't see it very well. It's very subtle. But now I'm going to take the Mod Podge and I just brush it right on top, and you'll start to see your color come out. Let me pour a little bit in my cap here. It's kind of thick. I don't water it down. I just used it straight. And that other one, this one here, only has one coat. So, you know, it did really well holding it together and everything. So I'm going to just brush this on. And I don't do a super heavy coat. I just put it on, and I'm not gentle. I'm not a gentle person. I kind of just go for it. Kind of like my cooking. I just kind of, as you see, I just do my thing. That's probably why I make such a mess all the time. I guess I've never been a delicate girl. I've never been accused of being a girly girl, that's for sure. I'm a kind of like down in the dirty farm girl. I go out with the animals and muck stalls. It don't matter. Do what you got to do. And I just spread it around. And it's really cool when it starts to dry and you start to see all these colors come out. It's pretty amazing when this deep, rich color starts coming out of nowhere. And you're never going to get any two that look the same. There's just no way you'll ever get it to look the same. Some will be lighter, some will be darker. It depends on how much ink you put on it, how wet you got your paper. But it all comes out looking really, really cool. So, spread it around. I'm trying, if there's any spots like here where it's thick, I just move it around. You don't have to have super thick layer. If you had a spray, like a clear spray, you could probably do that too, but I don't have any, and I don't like the smell of them. I'm pretty sensitive to smells, and I don't need anything that's going to stink up my house. If I was in a warmer climate and I could run outside, it might be different, but it's below 0 here, and it ain't getting warmer for a while. Alright, looks like I need just a little bit more. I just want to make sure I got it all covered. And if it's not, you can always add another, add a little extra here and there. Let me see. Looks like I think I got it. Looks like I got a pretty good layer on everything. Just going to go around the edges a little bit because you know what? Even after I cut this for my book, I'm not going to waste the corners. I can use them to layer up some other pieces that want the leather look to them. Maybe some little pieces on tags or in some clusters. It's not a difficult procedure. It is a little time consuming. I mean, you have to wait for the stuff to dry, but it's not hard. And that's the fun part for me, is just to be able to go and, because I have 110 things going on at the same time, I can do something, walk away from it, come back, do a little bit more. And there you go. So now all I have to do is let it dry again. This shouldn't take too long. This didn't take as long. The first time, because I wet the paper down, I think it takes longer. But once this is dry, we will come back and I will show you how this one turned out. Here we go. I wanted to show you the finished faux leather. I think this one turned out really, really well. Every time it just seems to get better and better. There's my first one. There's my second one. And I love them both. Now, if you want this, you can see this doesn't stick very well, so I just went and peeled it off, and you have to glue that back down before I peel it off. It's still a little damp on the back. I got a little ahead of myself here, so obviously you have to be real careful when you peel it off. But as you can see, I can just glue it back together. So, and once I glue it down on something else, I'm going to be putting a lot of glue on the back. There you go. I guess my edge was a little, probably didn't get enough glue down there to start with. But I will just glue that back together, no big deal. I don't stress about it. I'm not going to let it worry me. It's just paper after all, right? So let me add a little Elmer's glue. Since this is what's in my bottle, is a little bit of Elmer's glue. That's what I originally used. We shall stick you back together. Easy peasy, done. And that will dry and it'll be just fine. So when I get to using it on my book, I will show you guys how I used it. Be careful here. I got a lot of little edges down here I didn't have last time. And I'm going to, yeah, this is different. Last time I didn't have quite so many little edges sticking. So if you do peel your back off, be real careful. Don't just rip it. But I would be afraid to leave the back on unless I put a lot heavier glue on there, because as you see, it came off fairly easy. So I'm going to take that off. I can cut it however I want to use it now. If you're worried about it coming apart, you could put a layer of glue on the back. Otherwise, just take a couple of spots that came up. when I did it, you know, before, I took my time, and I do tend to rush when I do these videos because I worry about going over time or you guys getting bored and not wanting to see the whole process. So I don't like to make you think I'm just making you sit here for nothing. But anyway, that's it. That's the whole thing. I think it turned out super well. It's just paper bags. Now, I wanted to tell you before I forget, if you do not have all these colors of inks, that's okay too. You could take one color and do a slight wash over it with like a paper towel. That'll soften that color a little bit, make it shrink back into the background. Then you can use the same color and hit it hard on the top again. I've taken them and I've added water to them, taken it with the sponge and lightly gone over it like we did with the whole thing. And you can change the colors a little bit. You saw me take the gold marker. I've used other colors. There's water, the children's washable markers. You can take some of those and scribble it onto something like plastic. Add a little bit of water to it. You can turn that into like something that you can gently go over the surface. So don't worry if you don't have all of these. You can use markers. The washable markers work really good for this too. I should have showed you that and didn't think about it until just now. But anyway, there you go. Let me know what you think. I think it turned out really nice. Let me know if you try this technique and how it turned out for you. So anyway, just wanted to give you a quick show on how to use a simple paper bag to make faux leather. Have a great day, everybody.